We always hear about the great men who shaped history, the church fathers who basically built the foundations of Christian thought. But what if I told you that some of the most important of these men had a secret weapon, a teacher who guided them from the shadows? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on one of history's most influential and yet most overlooked women, Macrina. Okay, so let's set the stage. We're talking about the 4th century Roman Empire. Christianity is pretty new on the scene, legally speaking, and it's in the middle of this huge identity crisis, trying to figure out its core beliefs. And right at the heart of it all are 2 brothers from a place called Cappadocia, which is in modern-day Turkey. Their names are Basil the Great and Gregory of Nyssa. And look, these guys aren't just minor players. Their ideas about things like the Trinity are still foundational today. They are absolute titans. So, the big question is, who taught these geniuses? Who was it that sharpened their minds and really shaped their spiritual vision? Now, you might guess it was some famous philosopher in Athens, or maybe a big-shot scholar down in Alexandria. But the real answer? Well, it's a lot closer to home, and it is the absolute key to this entire story. To find this incredible teacher, we have to look inside their family. And let me tell you, this was not just any family. We're talking about a religious and intellectual powerhouse. A household with the wealth, the education, and the deep-seated faith to have enormous influence across the entire empire. So let's do a quick roll call of the key players. You've got Emilia, the devout mom who really held everything together. Then there's this incredible group of kids. Basil, the brilliant star everyone thought was destined for greatness. Gregor, the younger brother who would end up writing this whole story down. And Peter, the youngest, who Macrina basically raised herself. But right at the top, the eldest of all of them, is Macrina. That's the name you need to remember. She is what this is all about. And this is a point you have to get. This family had it all. I'm talking wealth, land, political connections, and access to the very best education money could buy in the Roman world. They were the 1%, the absolute elite. And knowing that, well, it makes what Macrina does next so incredibly radical. See, at a pretty young age, Macrina's life was totally upended by a tragedy. Her fiancé died out of nowhere, and that single loss would completely redefine her entire life, and as a result, the lives of every single person around her. And this timeline here shows you just how fast everything changed. Around age 12, which was totally normal back then, she gets engaged to a promising young man. But then, tragedy hits. He dies before they can even get married. Now, for any other woman of her status, the next step would be obvious. Find another husband. But Macrina, she chooses a completely different path. She declares that engagement was binding, that he was her husband, and she vows a life of celibacy, dedicating herself to what she called philosophy, basically a life of deep spiritual contemplation. Her brother Gregor actually explains her logic. He says she saw her fiancé not as dead, but as living with God, just away on a long journey. So by staying faithful to him, she was really staying faithful to God. It was this profound, unshakable decision, and it basically freed her from all the social expectations of marriage and put her on this incredible new course of intellectual and spiritual leadership. Okay, so Macrina makes this personal vow, but here's the thing. She doesn't just retreat into isolation and live a quiet life. Oh no. She starts to actively reshape the entire world around her, starting with her own super ambitious family. And this is where her brother, Basil the Great, comes back into the picture. He shows up, fresh from the best schools in Athens, a superstar speaker, brilliant, celebrated, and, according to his own brother Gregor, incredibly arrogant. He was on the fast track to fame, wealth, and power. He was the poster boy for worldly success. And this slide really lays out the choice he was facing. On one side, you have everything his education and his entire society told him to want: fame, status, wealth, pride. And on the other side, you have the path Macrina is showing him, a higher philosophy of humility, of prayer, of community. She wasn't just suggesting a new hobby. She was asking him to tear down his entire identity. So what happens next is just incredible. This young woman, his older sister, takes on the celebrated scholar. Gregory tells us that through patient, logical, and just relentless conversation, she completely wins him over. She dismantles his pride piece by piece and convinces him that her philosophical life is the only one that truly matters. And Basil, the great speaker, is persuaded to give it all up. But Basil's conversion, that was just the tipping point. With her most ambitious brother now on her side, Macrina started her real project. She convinces her own mother, Amelia, to join in. And together, they totally transform the family estate. They free the people they enslaved and invite them to live as equals. I mean, can you even imagine how revolutionary that was? They give up their status, pool all their money, and create one of the first monastic communities for women, a place built on prayer, study, and shared work. She literally built a new world. Now, a story this amazing could have so easily been lost to time, right? But it wasn't. And we have the brother who admired her most to thank for that. So, right after Macrina dies, a grief-stricken Gregor sits down and writes The Life of Macrina. And this wasn't just some sentimental, my sister was great biography. No way. It was what's called a hagiography, a carefully built argument using all the tools of classical rhetoric to prove that his sister was a true philosopher and a saint, whose life was the model for all Christians. You know, throughout his writings, Gregor rarely just calls her his sister. He gives her a title of immense respect in the ancient world. He calls her the teacher. For him, she wasn't just family. She was the intellectual and spiritual compass for his entire family, the one who set the course for him and for his famous brother Basil. So what is her real legacy? Well, it's huge. She's the one who taught her brothers that true theology isn't about winning public debates. It's about living a life of humility and contemplation. That idea became the bedrock of their life's work. In fact, one of Gregor's most famous books is a dialogue he stages with her on her deathbed, where she's the master philosopher explaining the meaning of life. She founded a pioneering monastic community, a radical experiment in social equality, and through her biography, she gives us this incredibly rare, detailed picture of powerful female leadership in a man's world. And all of this leaves us with one final big question. Macrina's story was almost completely hidden behind the giant legacies of her brothers. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other brilliant teachers, thinkers, and leaders have been shaping history's so-called great men, their own incredible stories waiting just out of frame, ready to be told?